Hi, HR Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Super excited about today's show. We're joined by Amy Coleman, Corporate Vice President of HR and Corporate Functions at Microsoft. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks, Chris. I'm doing good.
It's nice to see you. What time is it? Have I woke you up too early today?
No, it's not too bad. It's 8:23 in the morning. I don't know. What time is it there?
It's like 4:23. So we're kind of like
okay, you're better. You got the better end of this.
Did I? I don't know. Well, maybe you're a morning person. I don't know. Maybe are you a morning? Would you say you're a morning person?
I think in these jobs you have to be both. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm a morning person because I have to be.
You got choice.
Yeah, I guess I'm a night person because I like my time at night too. So you're kind of both sides, I guess.
I suppose
that's what
now
both ends.
Yeah, you said before we recorded you got teenagers. Do you become less of a morning person when they grow up? So you get a bit more sleep? Is that I'm hoping you say yes. Please say yes, because I really need to.
They sleep so much better. So I think, you were telling me that you have a three-year-old, and I think, people lie. They talk about newborn sleep. They don't talk about that it kind of is hard to like 7 or 8.
Oh, really? Oh, don't tell me that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. All right. At least I'm prepared in advance now. We're really lucky with Robin. I always keep saying it out loud into the universe so it continues. Even as a baby up until 3, she's always slept like religiously from 7 till 7.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I know she's going to go to sleep at that time and she's going to get up at 7. And I'm like, I thought that was normal until I met other parents and they were like, what? That's amazing. And I was like, all right, we got it lucky here. But apparently you never get it with both kids. So it's like they're like your next one's not going to be so lucky, Chris. I'm like, don't say that as well.
They trick you. And why do people tell you the worst parts? I've always wondered that. It's such a funny thing about humans.
It's true.
From the moment that you're, either you're pregnant or you're adopting or something they tell you something, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you the game changer is when they figure out the concept of a weekend. When a kid can understand a weekend is different from a weekday, I think as a parent, that's a game changer.
Really? So, I never thought about that. Also, they kind of give you a bit of a break, like kind of they're more conscious of it. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, 7 a.m. on a, Wednesday mornings, but 7 a.m. on a Sunday, that's different to me.
You're like, leave me alone. Well, it's like my wife and I look at each other in the morning. We're like, who's getting up? Who's getting the lay-in today?
Right. Rock, paper, scissors about who goes next.
Exactly. And normally I lose. So as well. But that kind of leads us to our first question. Tell everyone a little bit more about yourself personally and your journey to where we are now.
Sure. Let's see. I have personally, I'm in the Pacific Northwest. I would say, Chris, it's probably a little bit like London. I think it is a lot like London. There's a lot of bright gray. There's a lot of different shades of gray of what it looks like outside today. Yeah, a lot of the time it's raining. It's not a lot of rain per se, but it's raining a lot. Let's see, I grew up in the West Coast. I'm West Coast born and bred, California. Came up to the Seattle area for grad school and then kind of stayed ever since and been at Microsoft a long time. But I'm a boomerang. So I came to Microsoft, I left and did some startups sort of during the second kind of .com boom and bust. I'm part of a blended family. So I have 4 kids, 4 teenagers right now, 16, 16, 18, and 19.
Wow.
2 in college and 2 in high school, 3 girls. So I'll just leave it at that. It's a day between coffee and wine. It's just.
I was about to say, I was like, I can't even imagine. I don't even know where to start. You kind of lost me for words there. I can barely deal. I'm complaining about dealing with a 3-year-old right now, so I'm struggling.
Well, I think 3 is hard. 3 is hard. So yeah, it's, and then I love what I do. I get to, I have a super amazing job that I get to do things that I never thought I'd get to do here at Microsoft, and with an amazing team and great CHRO, amazing CEO. So not every day is, amazing. There's lots of hard decisions to make, but, generally I get a lot of joy from what I do. Yeah.
Nice. And I love asking this question because I always get different answers. Did you choose HR or did it kind of choose you along the way?
I chose it.
Really? You're like one of like, normally I can say I can count it on 2 hands how many people chose it. And now you're one of those. It's few.
I know.
Oh, wow.
It's odd. I know, it's odd. So Chris, I went to, I think my plan in my head, I came from a family of, both my dad and my stepdad were doctors, both my mom and my stepmom were nurses. So I sort of thought I'd follow that path, and fell in love with sort of the people part of science in college. And then I looked for a grad school that had HR. And at the time there was like 2 in the US. I mean, and now it's a thing. By the way, I don't even think I'd be able to
It
make
wasn't
it
even
far.
called HR. It was probably called something else, right? Like personnel relations or something along those lines.
Now you're aging me, but
I didn't mean to. Yeah.
But I think, at the time it was like, org development people. I can't even remember.
Organization
at the time,
psychology or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I sort of picked it, and went to grad school and I liked the business side of HR. I liked the versus like going all the way to sort of you could do something sort of more private practice sort of in the psychology realm, but I liked the business and the people. I liked that combination. I liked that friction. I thought it was super cool.
No,
who knew?
No. It's funny how you're one of a few, right? And that surprises some people whenever they listen to the show and they realize that if they kind of look at the top HR leaders around the world, 99% of them didn't choose this role.
Yeah.
It kind of just like I literally just spoke to the chief learning officer of Shell, and he was a supply chain director.
Yeah.
Now he's the chief learning officer globally for Shell. And it's like, well, the skill transfer and the interests and the passions, they are transferable. You don't have to know the specifics, right? You have a team. You have an amazing team around you that has those specialist skills, right? Or Lawrence Schuster, chief learning officer over at Lego. He was in sales at Lego, and now he's the chief people officer. It's always interesting to see that. And normally when I speak to people that pursued a career in HR, it's because like a family member was in the field or, something along those lines. But the fact that you identified that so early on is actually really interesting.
And you know what, Chris, it's interesting here at Microsoft because I've been here through every CHRO and the ones that, so Kathleen, my boss, is like you said, she's from the business. And that's been a model that's worked really well here, I think. And it'd be interesting. I haven't really thought a lot about it. I mean, she surrounds herself with a lot of, sort of subject matter experts or people that grew up in HR, but it works really well. I don't know, I could say it's a tech company. So or somebody that really kind of embodies the culture. And then, like you said, it's really transferable, but it's the model here has been really picking an amazing leader from the business and then surrounding them with great HR talent. Hopefully.
I think it makes sense. Have you ever taken time out of HR and come back or no? Interesting.
Nope. Always been in tech and always been in HR. So yeah.
You think that's something you'd ever consider? Kind of just stepping away into another part of another role in this business?
I would. I mean, when I was at the startup that I was at, there's so much that is, like you said, transferable. I remember, it's a startup at the time. So, we changed our name and changed our mission quite a few times when I was there.
That's pretty normal.
But pretty normal. And they were like, well, you lead HR. What about being the COO? And I remember at the time going, well, I think could sound really interesting and a ton of transferability. So I would do something outside. Yeah. I think a lot of what I do every day
isn't HR. Think about the work that you did around the pandemic. That's not HR, but the skills that you learned, the relationships, the knowledge, experience, knowing the business, the people, that's all transferable, right? Yeah. Across all of those.
I don't really think of myself as an HR person, which is interesting, but I think of myself as a business person that works in the people business. But maybe that's kind of how I think about it. Maybe that's helpful on some days, and maybe that makes this function more relatable, because I think sometimes it can get kind of intimidating, or it can even have a bit of an eye roll, like, HR.
It's a bit of a brand identity, isn't it? Like it doesn't really, if you say HR, it doesn't really explain or encompass really what the role is. Right. Of HR. That's why, again, one of the reasons I do this show is to share the amazing work that happens. And my friends and family now, their idea of what HR is was completely different. And now they know this show and what we do. They're like, wow, that's HR? And I'm like, yeah. Right. I'm like, yeah. We're doing an interesting video series in a few weeks. And obviously I'll send you the link, where we're going to go out on the street around London and ask professionals what they think HR functions do.
That's awesome.
And I'm going to post it on LinkedIn. So I don't know.
Oh my God, that is awesome.
Yeah, I don't know it's going to be interesting, right? So I'm going to go to different, business districts around London and ask everyone, not just business professionals. It could be the, guy on the train or someone, a road sweeper. What do you think the role is of your HR function? Yeah. And also, how do you feel that you were supported by your business during the pandemic? And there's a couple of questions we're going to ask, but I'm really excited to see.
That sounds super fun.
Because we're in our own bubble. I'm also in your bubble because I'm speaking to HR executives every day. So I feel like I'm also in a bubble because I'm only speaking to people at the very top. So what does the everyday professional really think as well? So I'll share that with you. Should be.
Yeah, cool. That's super cool because I think, it's so much more broad than people know. Yeah. And, it's always good. I go join or I say to somebody in passing or somebody socially, like I'm in HR, and it's so interesting to hear their experience. You're right. You live in a bubble. Like, I think what we do, we're super flawed, we're superhuman, but I also think our purpose is really kind of amazing what we think we can do and what we're chartered to do, but sometimes people's experience is not that. So I can either it'll be like Chris Rainey, like Jimmy Fallon, like out on the street there. I like the idea of it.
No, exactly. I thought it would be funny. Maybe I can't wait for me and like, oh, that was shocking. But I'm just I'm just willing to give it a go and see, right?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think it's fun.
How was the transition been? I've actually followed a lot of work and research that you've put out. Microsoft has shared, been quite open of sharing its strategy of hybrid, and many people have looked to Microsoft as a model to do that, and some incredible work by the team. What's the transition like being for you to hybrid, to working in this hybrid model at Microsoft?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. And first, like you said, we've got we've got our research team, which I think you've talked to, Chris, with our future of work that are really doing like cutting edge research about how do you learn together? How do you collaborate? Even with kids, your kids' age, like going all the way in deep into schools and try to figure out how do we do things differently. So there's some amazing research, amazing sort of cross-company team that's making hybrid come to life. But we're just starting the true hybrid, transition. I think we thought we were hybrid because we're, the offices were sort of partially open. So people had if you had a preference to come in and wanted to, and that's how you worked best, you could, but you weren't really counting on seeing people. And now that we've sort of announced that we're, at least, and I'm specifically talking about where I'm sitting today in the Puget Sound, there's lots of different places. I think we have close to 200,000 employees around the world. There's lots of different places that are open in different ways, depending on where they are in the pandemic and the vaccine, et cetera. But for where I sit in the state of Washington, it's been interesting. Just the transition, Chris, to say, okay, what do you love about what you learned? Like, let's take the tragedy and the grief of the pandemic aside for a second and say, okay, so if I was working for you or you were working for me, like, what do you love about how you worked in the last couple of years? What do you not want to leave behind? What do you want to bring with you? What'd you learn about yourself and the best way you work? And then how can we make that happen here? I think the companies who can make that happen are the ones that are going to succeed in this hybrid, but it's hard. It's, we all had to learn how to work remotely, despite what people think that for tech, we probably knew how. It just wasn't really culturally. Of course there was people in the field that were traveling all the time that knew how to do that. But sitting in a corp seat, it wasn't, nobody told me I couldn't, but it was a little bit more of like, maybe every once in a while I'd work from home. And so we all had to learn how to work remotely, but the playing field was rather level at that point. So now we're in this space of trying to learn hybrid. So we're trying to work on how do you have more transparency? How do you welcome the conversation? How do we give managers and employees the tools to have that conversation? Like, boy, I really like the ability to come in a couple of days, not come in a couple of days. I like to be able to, today I'm going to leave a little bit early so I can make my yoga class at the end of the day. So I have a break in the middle of the day. So that's when I'm going to drive home. And so how do you have that conversation with your manager? And as a leader, how do you also plan for both, right? Plan to meet all the individual needs, but also meet the team needs of connecting and that. So I think it's an incredible challenge ahead of us. And I think it's a game changer for diversity, for inclusion. Just the opportunity to go hire people and have them want to work here but they want to live and be in the community where they're most engaged, for their family, for their friends, for whatever reason. And so thinking about how do we make that all come to life, it's intimidating, but I think it's an awesome challenge.
Yeah, you're right. It's like looking at this through a lens of opportunity. Obviously, it's been a huge tragedy, but there's been so many amazing things to come out of it. And you mentioned so many already as well. And it's the companies that do listen and take action are the ones that are gonna thrive. What would you say? You mentioned that feedback from employees about what are the things you want to keep and what are the things you want to, what do you want to keep? What do you want to change? What are the main things that they identified over the last few years that they want to keep?
Yeah, I think this is not how employees articulate it, Chris, but I think autonomy is a lot of us gained some autonomy about how we work for the first time. And again, I don't think it was sort of explicit, like you must be in the office Monday through Friday, X time to X time, but I think it was implied. Culture happens in the hallway.
Yeah, it's like the unspoken.
Right.
Yeah. You can do this, but everyone's like, but can I?
Yeah, but like, really?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that autonomy, and it's the hard thing is it's so individual. You and I were chatting before this, and I said, I love that I could be home, even when I have teenagers that don't talk much. Just kind of based on their mood, I can be home at that time when they got home from school and hear about their day, even if it's for 5 minutes. I've never had that opportunity as a mom ever. And so those are the bits that people really like, that they want to keep that autonomy, whether it's the wearing their sweats or whether it's being around their kids or their family or whether it's taking care of a loved one. They want to be able to do both. So I think that's the stuff that people want to carry forward. It's how do you normalize that conversation? And how do you also have managers and leaders not be afraid? Yeah. So we're trying to work, Chris, we talk a lot about how do you get to yes? How do you experiment and say, sure, Chris, your job before was based in the US, but you really want to live in London. Hey, let's give it a try. And you got to lean in and compromise with me, and I've got to do the same. It doesn't have to be a forever agreement. So that's kind of fear we're trying to take out of the system.
And it's hard to systemize that as well. Talking about systems, it's hard to systemize that. We're so used to systemizing it. It used to be, there's a policy for this, there's a structure for this. There is none.
Yep.
So it's really like that back and forth and that trust and that relationship between the leader and each employee, right? Yeah. More than this is how we work.
Yes. And how do you get enough of that, whether you call it trust or psychological safety? But, what I want to make sure is you have enough trust with your manager to say, hey, I kind of want things to be different versus having a conversation with a recruiter about that. And I'm so amazed that, it's just such an opportunity when an employee feels more comfortable to talk to a recruiter about what they want in their future versus their current manager. So that's what we got to get around. But you're right. We call that hybrid paradox, right? They want the flexibility of remote, but the collaboration and the communication of in person. We want it both. And I think it's a fair challenge to put. It's such a cool space and a cool space that you're in, Chris, to think we're part of this disruption of the workplace that hasn't been around for a long, long time. So it's cool.
Well, again, when we think about HR, we're talking about the leaders and the function that are literally shaping the future of work. I know we've used that a lot, the future of work a lot, but quite literally in the last few years and now, and we're still at the beginning of the journey and we don't know how this is going to unfold. This is new for everyone really in this context. Yes, we had hybrid before, we had various versions of it, but now I think it's a whole different context. When we say those words, it means something different. Emotionally, it means something different from what everyone's been through as well. Like I said to you, for example, it made me wake up and say, I want to be there and pick up my daughter from nursery. I don't want to, I want to be able to do that, and I shouldn't have to compromise. Whereas I kind of convinced, and I owned a company. And I still didn't think that was possible. How crazy is that? I set rules for my own business based on my past organizations because I thought that's just how a business has to work as well. So psychologically, it's a shift.
What you're modeling now for your team, for those that never thought they had that implied permission, now what you're modeling for the team. And that's the other thing we're trying to do is, how do I model it for my team How do I have my individual preference, but also, knowing that a leader's shadow, casts long. So I gotta be careful about what I do, what I say, not careful, but intentional, I guess, about what I do and what I say, and model what we're trying to teach the rest of the business, or trying to have the conversation with about hybrid. Because it's just such an opportunity. I think it's super cool space we're moving into.
Like that conversation part is so important. Like I've had so many conversations about that, and we do need to help prepare our leaders to have those conversations. Because, it's when I was a leader, or, I am a leader now, but a manager of a team in a business, the types of conversations they're having now are like so different around well-being, around being vulnerable as a leader is a kind of a whole new concept to many, right? And sharing and leading with empathy and stuff like that. It's so, many of our leaders don't even have the language to communicate this common language in the organization of what that means. What can I say? And then, so unfortunately, they end up saying nothing. So they don't want to risk saying the wrong thing, right? Or not have any answers. And part of it is going, you don't have to have all the answers. Be there to listen as well. And if you do need to, signpost, you can also do that as well. So it's a huge shift from both sides.
And I think it's so good to think about, how do we give more people the language? I mean, I think Satya, our CEO, has done a great job of talking about empathy since he became the CEO, and likely before that, but talking about how to do that and how to sit in that. It's interesting. I also think about, I can't remember who wrote it, but I was reading something that said, I don't know, Chris, if you've ever been in a conversation where someone says, thank you so much. And I'm thinking, I haven't done anything, but listening, you're actually sharing, your energy with that other person. You're giving them your energy and time, which is really, it's a huge gift. And so I think about that in this time. And, being in a US based company, we love to act. We like momentum. We like motion. We have a bias for action. So teaching leaders to sit and not know the answer, like you said, sit in that space with those employees and say, well, you know what, I don't know, but let's try to figure it out together, or let's try something together. Or let me ask, let me, brainstorm with a few other people on this. That's hard to do. I think it's like you said, there's vulnerability, there's mistakes, there's all sorts of things that introduces that we're trying to kind of get in our business language more and more around here.
Yeah. And it's also just understanding and communicating that that's okay, that if we fail, or like you mentioned, if you want to go try to work in London for a few months or a year, let's see how it works.
Yeah.
Let's not be closed off to the idea, and we both be super clear that it may not work out. Whereas in the past, we just wouldn't try anything. And the first time you hear that someone's unhappy is that they've handed in their resignation.
You're right.
Because
how do we get to yes without saying no first? So, having managers and employees sort of practice that is super important. I talk to a lot of employees about it's the same way you talk to your kids about what's the worst case scenario of talking to your manager about what you want. Like, what do you think? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? I can't imagine a scenario where you say, gee, I really want to work in London. And I say, hey, you're fired. So let's play out the worst case scenario. So I can help you build the courage and the language to go have that conversation and at least try it out.
Yeah.
Step into it kind of thing.
I just try and flip that on other way around and be like, and say to the team and even my wife, etc., what's the worst? What if you don't act?
Yeah, great.
What if you don't say anything? Then you're going to continue to be upset. You're going to continue to work in a company you don't want to work for, or a manager you don't want to work for. You're going to continue to do. So that's, and by the way, that's for sure. So that is certain, because you're already in that space. So I just kind of the reframing of it. Because people are, oh yeah, but what about this, Chris? And I'm like, but what if you don't do it?
What if you don't?
What if you don't? So I think it's important, just that simple shift of thinking, and then you ask people those questions. And I've asked my wife something similar in the past, and vice versa. You're like, yeah, it's true. I'm just going to continue to be unhappy as well.
It's this.
The
Chris, and you bring up something that reminds me of one of the things when you were asking me about hybrid that I think is so interesting is there's this inertia around this last couple of years now, going into year 3 of the pandemic, this inertia of Well, now I've learned how to work from home. I think I'll stay home. And so we're also trying to not try to get people back to the office, honestly. We want people to do work in the way they work best, but we want them to remember also what the office feels like and decide with that data, do they want to have, an office here? Do they want to think? So we're trying to also break that inertia. And you forget, it's really small habits, like, it's commuting again. Is that worthwhile? We're seeing in some of our future work trends, like the company's got to make the tax, whether that's getting up and dressing for work and, dropping your kids off and commute or whatever it is, you got to make that time in the office worthwhile. So how do you also remind your employees of the energy and the joy they may get from working around others and the benefit they have of working from home and how to do both? So inertia is a really interesting thing, that we're kind of combating in this sort of change management time with hybrid. It's been super fascinating to see.
I think it's even more interesting as well when you think about people that it's their first experience of a workplace.
Yeah.
And think if you've been onboarded virtually and you've never had what we've had, where we've worked in, in companies for many, many years, you don't know what that feels like.
Yeah.
So you're just maybe assuming that this is amazing working from home, whereas you could be one of those people that love being in an office like I do. I love being with my team, but we come in, everyone comes in on a Monday, so we all could spend time together, and it's not about sitting on laptops. It's about, communication. It's about innovation. It's about collaboration and the energy of just getting to know each other and building that bond as well. And then you can choose however you want to work for the rest of the week as well. But there's some people that choose, like my co-founder, he wants to come in and be here. And the same for me. I like the mindset shift from being in my house to being in work mode. Like I just personally like the separation. It works for me as well. But if you've never experienced any of that and it's your first job, I feel like it's important that they get to taste what that looks like and feels like, because they may love it. I'm sure many of them will at that early stage in their career.
It's I think we've hired close to 60,000 people since the pandemic started at Microsoft that have never, well, that's too absolute, most that have never stepped into an office. One of our offices, whether that's for lunch or for dinner or for they actually have an office or a workspace. And think about what we could unlock, that because you and I sound very similar, Chris. Like, I like the work environment. I like the energy. And even when nobody was here, I liked it. I liked a little bit of that separation. So, but I love having people here. I love laughing in the hallways. I mean, I joke about, I'm so glad that being authentic at work is cool, because I don't think I ever knew how not to be. I want to love the people I work with. It's just the way that I work. And so this works really well for people like me. But how do you also unlock the benefits of it with people that may not know any different? I think it's a really great point.
Yeah, there's so much as well. There's like mentoring, there's coaching, there's a knowledge transfer that happens in person. You kind of may bump into someone who works in finance operations and you kind of build a bond there. And there's all these sort of organic moments, like the water cooler chats that everyone always describes it as, that you can't build online unless you intentionally. And to be honest, everyone tried these like virtual, Teams water cooler things, and after a few months, people kind of got bored of them because it didn't feel authentic or organic, because it isn't. You're kind of it's there are benefits obviously, but that organic element of that knowledge transfer and relationships is hard to recreate.
Yeah, that virtual happy hour. I mean, how many of those did you have on Dread by week 6 or something?
After a while, it was like virtual unhappy hour, because it's another Zoom call I've got to go to, or another Teams call that I've got to go to.
By the way, my waistline can't sustain that either.
That's also true.
It's not good. But Satya, we've done a lot of studies around social capital building, right? Like, so Chris, if you and I work together and then the next time we're in something that's friction filled, but I have that relationship with you, I'm going to trust that you have my best intentions in mind. You know all this stuff. And so how do you build that? Dare I say the generation, including my teenagers, are way better at building real relationships online than certainly I am.
That's their wealth. That's where they come from, right?
Yeah. So the reach is amazing. The amount of people that I can connect with and reach virtually, but how do you also keep that really tactical relationship,
Mm-hmm.
the warmth, the social capital, keep building that so we don't keep debiting from that kind of social capital account. It's going to be important.
Yeah. Well, part of this is obviously we're talking about culture as well, right? And Microsoft has a long history of reimagining culture. What does culture really mean? How would you say that the pandemic shaped that? Because, you know, how do you make sure someone can feel the energy or feel part of a culture when they're halfway across the world in front of a laptop, for example?
Yeah. You know, I think, you know, we really tested our culture. I mean, I think a crisis tests the culture, right? Being part of the COVID leadership team, there was probably 10 of us at its core. You know, you're making decisions really fast. And so I know I leaned on the culture and our values a lot to say, okay, I really don't have much data to make this decision. And, you know, something like, Chris, as an example, boy, parents, early on in the pandemic, parents can't get their kids vaccinated. This is before, you know, we had sort of this 5 to 11 and things. Like, what can we do for parents that's different? You know, making some calls and so really relying on our culture that, you know, put employee health and safety first, and employee wellness, and employees at the center, and employee experience, and customer obsession. And so and diversity and One Microsoft, those are the things that I leaned on to make those calls fast. So I think it put our culture to the test. And, you know, dare I say, I think we stood up to that test. But your question, the second part of your question is a good one. And we're still trying to figure that out. I think we probably over-relied on, hey, come to one of our main sort of, I wouldn't call them hubs, but one of our main offices to learn about the culture. And now that doesn't scale, and it doesn't actually make sense. I still think there's times that we get together in person that are going to be really critical. Like you talked about a few of them with your team, innovation and things like that. But those big events, whether it was new employee orientation or maybe the big sales conference that's out, you know, the one that's in Vegas or the one that's in Atlanta or something like that. And now that more of those are turning virtual, how do you have those moments where people go, oh, now, you know, I can feel the culture. So we're still trying to figure that out. I think that going virtual with some of those events, you know, this is harder than it looks. I mean, it's not like you just turn it on. No. You don't just turn on the camera and go. You got to make it feel. You got to, how do you
experience? Yeah.
How do you have an experience? How do you emote on camera and things like that? So I think we're still learning, how do we build culture at scale if maybe you may never come to the office. So I think that's a challenge that I think we're chipping away at it, but I think we're going to learn as we go too.
Yeah. I think it goes back to our point earlier, though. A lot of that's felt through the way that for our leaders and our managers and how they communicate with their teams.
Yep.
You know, again, leading with empathy, for example. If that's a common, value of an organization, that's going to help shape your culture and how the way those people feel. So they could be anywhere in the world virtually, but still understand that I work for an organization that really cares about me, the whole me, not just the work me, the at home me, like you mentioned with the parents, and that is your culture. Yeah. And you may have different segments of culture. You may have different pockets in different parts of the world.
Sure.
As well. So that's also something we can't be ignorant to. That's real. And that exists.
Well, and I think Satya has talked about, like, how do we keep those, what's really important to certain businesses. So think about a gaming studio culture could be very different from Office 365 culture. And so, and then what are the few things you double down on that are critical to everyone? And so I think those are the things, like you said, during the pandemic, we had at some point we had daily communication from the commander in charge of the COVID V team, which was one of Satya's directs. And then Kathleen, my boss, talked to managers weekly and about those things, giving them language around empathy, giving them language about experimentation. The other thing, Chris, that we did a lot of during this time was really sort of change our tone with managers. I think historically, we're really hard on managers. And I think we changed our tone to say, boy, being a manager is a really hard job. Yeah. So how can we help you? Especially during the pandemic, where we're telling you to connect more often and get really curious about the individual, but make sure and keep take care of yourself and keep the business running and prioritize.
Any more things? And to look after your kid. Like, it's like I can barely take care of myself.
Yeah, that too.
It's like I can barely take care of myself right now, and you're telling me to focus on the team, right? And then at the same time, I'm managing a 3-year-old running around and
climbing on you.
Yeah, it's like good luck. Yeah, it's true. I'm glad you did that.
Really tried to give people really usable tools, usable ideas, and also say, we know it's hard. Let us know how we can help.
Yeah, because we were seeing that. We were seeing everyone was like, "Oh, productivity has gone up." I'm like, "Yeah, but so is burnout and exhaustion."
Yeah.
So you may be seeing those numbers, but what you seeing? Are you seeing the full picture? Because I noticed that myself and my wife had got to the point where we were working. Like, we woke up, it was dark. We went to sleep, it was dark, and we haven't even left the house for the day. And for me, it resulted in super high anxiety. I had a panic attack during that time because I felt I was just overwhelmed with what was going on as well. So that is super important that we check in and understand that it's never been a tougher time to be a manager or a leader. As well, something's going to break. You cannot. There's only so many plates you can spin before one of them's going to fall. And that's okay as well. That's also okay to have conversations when you bring in managers together and say, "Oh, I'm also struggling over here."
Yeah.
And create those communities where people can share, what's working, what's not as leaders. I think companies have done a good job of doing that. I've seen many companies do great jobs. So because otherwise you just feel like you're the only one. We all beat ourselves up thinking I'm the only one struggling. And then you realize everyone's struggling, but just no one's really talking about it to each other.
Yeah, and Chris, you just did it. Like, storytelling is so powerful about like people's experiences, and how do you bring more humanity to all of this? Because, the last couple of years are a blur. I mean, we even started saying, what month is it? It's a blur. And, we lived at work, wherever that was. And so I think, how do you come out of that with learnings, but how do you really start to say, this is what happened to me, and this is what I'd like to share and normalize and model? And I think it's super powerful.
Yeah. How did managing the sort of the team and the COVID team during this affect you? How did you make sure you would you say you did a good job of taking care of your own mental health and well-being and putting yourself first?
No, I would say I didn't, and I don't think I knew it until it had like come up upon me. I think, this sort of this boundaryless work, there's having older kids, there's not the physical demands and attention that with younger kids. So it's really easy to sort of work all the time. And by the way, it doesn't make me any more productive or better at my job. I mean, the other parts of my life make me better at my job. Mm-hmm. Being a mom makes me better at my job. Being a wife makes me better at my job. Having friends and going places and seeing things. And so I don't think I did a very good job. I tried to talk about not doing a very good job and normalize that. And then tried to get ideas from others about, okay, what are some things that I can do differently? I think about, what is an investment, or, people ask me about self-care. It's really giving myself permission to do something else. And it's not necessarily doing one thing, but it's giving myself permission to say, give yourself permission to say,
I'm blocking my diary out and going yoga.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier, right? Like you said, like you said, like in the past you'd been like, oh, I can't do that. You're like, no. Yeah. I'm leaving early. I'm going yoga.
Yeah. So, and dare I say I'll be better at my job when I do. I know that. And so, or I'm going to, not open my laptop and, help my daughter with whatever it is, or go out to dinner. And so, and like really be present with the people that I love. And so that was hard for me. I wish I had discovered it earlier. But I didn't, and I've learned a lot about myself through this time, and so hopefully I can carry that forward and sustain it.
Yeah, I think everyone listening, including me, can relate to that as well. And I think one of the things I learned from my coach recently is to reframe that, because I used to beat myself a lot about that. Yeah. About like, oh, did I make time to spend with Robin, quality time, or was I distracted on my phone, for example, and I'd give myself a hard time. And now I kind of just obviously make more conscious effort, but also reframe it to, did I do my best to, and start there. So did I do my best to spend time with, did I do my best to, make my wife feel loved? Did I do my best to be, and because not every day you can do it. You can't do all those things all the time. So, but if you reframe it to, did I do my best to?
I love that.
It takes it from a different lens, and it really helped me. I have a checklist now that I do every day, literally. So in an Excel spreadsheet, and it has a list of all of those things. And did I do my best to, achieve, take us towards our company goals and mission? And I just kind of tick them off every day. And sometimes it's a green, and sometimes it's a yellow, and maybe I didn't do so well, right? And sometimes I don't do it all. But again, it's like, did I do my best to? And that's really helped.
I'm gonna steal that.
Yeah, well, thanks to Chester Elton, my coach. Shout out Chester, who's listening.
Yeah, I will.
So that's really helped me to do that. And I do that at the beginning. I look at it at the beginning of the day, and then at the end of the day, I kind of go through it. And I'm like, you got to give yourself a break sometimes.
Yeah, and Chris, I wish I could, and I probably tell more moms this than others, but I wish I could, now seeing what my daughters see, I wish I knew that along the way. I mean, they are super proud of me. They're, they go to school and they tell people what I do, and they probably elevate it, and they're braggy and like they're so happy that I worked and that I had this other part of me. And all of that sort of wasted motion of guilt and did I show up for them? I mean, showing up is super important, but it's also not the only thing. And so I wish I could have taken that back. If I look back at myself, I think, boy, Amy, they were going to be proud of you someday. They just can't articulate that yet. And I can remember the moment my oldest said, I think it's amazing what you do, Mom. And I thought, knock me over. Like that is those are the words that I was waiting for so many years. I just wish I could, help other parents say that your kids will see that in you. They'll see the purpose and the mission and the joy and the hard work. And you're teaching them stuff every day, even if you didn't do your best today. So I'm looking at my notes.
Yeah. And by the way, so many leaders and female leaders and mums and dads actually on the show have said exactly the same thing. But you don't know it until perhaps later in life that you realize the impact and that you've had, and that your kids will grow up seeing you as the example of someone who did do both, who was operating at the highest level within one of the biggest companies in the world and raising kids, right? Because a lot of people think they can have one or the other. Yeah. And they will sacrifice one and say, oh, I can't do that, right? Because of these things. You can have both, but understand there will be sacrifices that need to be made. Yeah. And you do also have to build a support system around you to help you. Yeah. And I learn and I make tons of mistakes. I tell my 18-year-old all the time, like, I've never raised an 18-year-old, so you got to work with me here. So that's a good way of saying it. And it's so true, though. It's like so true. I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, it's funny. And the same goes for work. I've never dealt with a global pandemic. I've never been in my job when there's a war in Europe. And so let's all learn together and try to figure it out. I mean, I've got amazing smart people on my team and peers and that I work for. And so let's try to figure it out with our mission and culture and values in mind. And the same at home too. Well, yeah. So, and it's to your point earlier about culture, and that those visions and value in the culture is that foundation. So no matter what's happening around you, whether it's a pandemic or it's a war or whatever it may be, you can always operate from that place of decision making. So when like you said earlier, you don't have all the data, but you do have that. You can operate and make decisions from that. And that's super important. It's something I struggled with for a while. If you don't have that, why, the purpose, the values, and you don't have any of the data or you're not sure, but at least you have somewhere to operate and make decisions from, because you're like, is what I'm doing aligned with our purpose and values? And if the answer is no, it's pretty simple. What you do, you're not going to do it, right? as well. Listen, before I let you go, I want to jump into our quick fire round. So, so I do this with every guest. So I'm going to ask you questions, but you only have 30 seconds for each question. Okay. All right, are you ready?
Ready.
I'm ready. Well, we've heard of one of them, but I'm going to ask you for some more though. What are your hobbies and passions outside of the office?
Travel, finding sunshine, yoga, and dogs. I love my dogs.
Love it. What dogs have you got?
Golden retrievers. too.
Nice.
They're
Amazing.
awesome.
Amazing.
They're also part of, they're part of the office now too. So
Oh,
not
are
in
they?
the office, in the virtual, not here with me.
Oh, I was like, oh, cool, even cooler.
No, the home office. How about that?
Yeah, I was about to say Zoom bombing, but I'm not allowed to say that, am I? Teams bombing. Sorry, we have to edit that part out now. The teams even like one request for the edit, Chris. Edit
You
that
can
out.
have a Zoom cat, Chris. I'll have a Teams dog.
All right, cool. Well, deal. If you could click your fingers and change one thing about HR, what would it be?
This is a hard one. The balance of all of us and individualism. I think that's the hardest thing in HR right now. And I'd say, how do you embrace individualism, but not get to sort of corrosive individualism where everybody only cares about themselves and what they want? And I think HR's right in that spot of trying to meet every employee where they're at, but also remind every employee we're all here for the same mission and purpose. So how do we set our differences aside in this really complicated world and do things together? Yeah.
It's more like not even a HR, it's an everyone problem.
And
by the way, I super get what you're saying, by the way. And again, I know everyone listening can relate to that as well. How do your family and your family and friends describe what you do for a living? If I asked your kids, what does mum do? What do you think they would say?
Yeah, I don't think they get much farther, Chris, than HR. And you talk to someone, you'd run into a friend and they think that you hire and fire people, and that's funny. But I guess
you're like after you're about to say after the first few times, it's no longer funny after that.
Yeah, right. As soon as you send me your CV, like I'm like, okay.
Do they do that? They're like, can you have a look at my CV?
Yeah.
Really? Like you sit there all day looking at CVs. Yeah, that's what I do. I just sit here looking at CVs all day. I'll read all the CVs. That's so funny.
I don't even, I've lost such touch with it all. I don't even know who to pass it to anymore. So I'll just embarrass myself and say, I'm the worst person to give your CV to. I admit that. So that's funny. I don't think my family could go. I mean, of course my husband knows more about it because he tends to be my who I verbally process to. So he'd know pretty well what I do. My kids would say HR, and she used to get on an airplane a lot. I think that's probably what they'd say.
That's an honest answer. That's
sure. Yeah. That's how it impacts their life. Right?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's their view, right?
Sure.
What legacy do you want to leave behind for your family?
Ooh, that's a big question. Rapid fire is supposed to be like favorite,
Yeah, I know. I surprised you with that one. You wasn't expecting that, was you?
Legacy that they actually align pretty well. My job and family would be about, making it better. And when I say making it better for those behind me, that'd be about inclusion, Chris. Like I want my girls to experience more of what I experience now than certainly what I experienced 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so how do I make the workplace better for all? How do I make home better? So that would be the legacy that I'd want to make it better and with inclusion in mind.
Well, it's very fitting that today is International Women's Day.
Women's Day, I know.
So
yay.
Happy International Women's Day.
Very cool. Thank you. You too.
And have you ever considered quitting? If so, why?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. I like the honesty. That's great. Yeah, sure. Yeah. But it's true, right? We all have. If anyone would be lying saying they haven't thought about quitting their job one day.
Yeah. If I didn't put myself into this job, it would mean I'd be lying to say there are days that aren't excruciatingly frustrating. And, and those are the days where, sure, it comes to mind. And then it's just like, have you ever considered thinking like, oh, why have I done what I've done at home, at work or whatever? But sure, I've thought about it a million times and I still continue to come back because I feel like there's work to be done and I feel like I can have impact. Mm-hmm. And this company, Chris, has believed in me a lot more than I believed in myself along the way. And so I feel like there's, I sort of owe that back too.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest investment you've made in yourself?
Boy, what we talked about earlier, I'd say the biggest investment in my career has actually been sort of that non-tangible thing called giving myself permission. And that like is sort of ... to do what I think is most important for me and for my family and for my job. Early on, I think,
I think that's important, by the way. Don't skip over that. That's a huge investment that you made in yourself. Because many of us don't ever find that, and we just conform and we just kind of stay within the rails. So I think it's amazing.
I think that's what I would stick with. I think, and it's a daily, struggle, but it's what I try to give myself as permission. I mean, even me saying to you, hey, Chris, I'm going to leave this afternoon so I can take the rest of my meetings from home and go to yoga. It's me practicing saying that.
Yeah.
So I can say it to myself. I give myself permission to do that. I know that everybody knows how to find me. It's not like we can't find each other if we need each other. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's also, you saying that also gives other people permission.
Yeah.
So it's just as important for your team and for everyone else to say, oh, okay, I can do, like, because sometimes we just don't know. It's like similar with, and I'm a terrible culprit of this, of taking time off. Many leaders don't even talk about it. So their teams don't even take the time off as well. So giving yourself permission, it's important that we verbalize that and communicate that for ourselves and for everyone else around you.
We saw this weird phenomenon, Chris, I think, between giving people free wellness days versus vacation. And lots of people didn't take vacation during the pandemic, which but everybody was so excited about these wellness days. And it's kind of one of the same, if you think about it, but it's actually implied permission.
Yes.
To take something that's about being whatever wellness means to you versus saying, I'm going to take vacation. So there is something super powerful about that permission and modeling, for sure.
Yeah. Who do you say is the one person that's had the biggest impact on your career? If I was going to tell you, rapid fire immediately, I'd say my current boss. And then, but earlier on is when I was in sort of the comp and ben space, I had a boss that was super hard on me in a bunch of different ways. But boy, he taught me how to do a whole bunch of things that are so transferable about how do you make things exec ready? How do you use data to tell your story? How do you influence others? And it was at a key point in my career and life that those are tools that, and still I'd consider him a friend. So I'm lucky to have many people that I've been able to watch. Can we give him a shout out? Can we give him a shout out?
What's that?
Can we give him a shout out?
Give him a shout out?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jay Ritchie, if you're listening from Santa Barbara, California, that one's for you. Yeah.
No, we're tagging. We're going to tag him in on LinkedIn now.
And Kathleen Hogan.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think we got that one. Go as well. That's amazing. And then last question. You're talking about advice you'd give your younger self earlier in the show, but sort of from a broader perspective, what's one piece of advice you'd give to the HR leaders tomorrow?
Oh, yeah, that's a good, I give the advice, I'd say, I talk about experimenting. I talk about learning. I would talk about getting to yes. I would talk about taking things out of the shadows, Chris. Like, how do you take things like we learned in the pandemic? How do you start talking about what do you want that's different in the workplace and normalize those things? How do you start talking about wanting to pick up your daughter from nursery? And how do you start saying that doesn't, that makes you better at your job? So taking things out of the shadows, experimenting, getting to yes and learning are the things that I think are super. I mean, there's a million technical parts of HR.
But that's it. So you say don't be afraid. So I suppose the advice would be don't be afraid to bring those.
I can talk about skilling and data and inclusion and managers, but what I think is really, it's a personal mindset. It's a leadership mindset that we really need to push. The pandemic is part of that push. So we need to continue to push. If we really want to be, I used to say like a decade ago, my girls are not going to get in their car and drive for 40 minutes and go to the same office every day. Why do I think that's not going to be relevant then? And now we're here. So how can we push ourselves to keep going forward?
Yeah, I've been saying that as well. Like when Robin's older, she's going to look at that and be like, you used to go to a place to do work and you would take your computer to the work, to open it, to sit there and do the work that you could do when you were sitting at home. Like, can you imagine explaining that to her? Trying to explain that to her when she's older, and we're like, but because it's going to seem so strange. that you could have done the exact same thing somewhere else, right? If you go now, obviously it's different. If you're going to work to collaborate, communicate, innovate, etc. Right? I mean, etc. Or for the experience, the office will be more of an experience, an employee experience, as opposed to a place you go. I think it's going to be the same with shopping. I feel like you're going to go to a retail outlet to buy clothes now, and it's not even going to be clothes on a rack. It's going to be an experience, and then you still order it online. You go to the store to experience the product and the culture and what it is, right? As well.
Think
so it's
about
going to
how
be
cool that is.
Yeah, I hope so. It's going to be interesting. I feel like we're aging ourselves even more now.
Well, I think about the other thing that I'd love to change about our profession, Chris, is like, you know, we talk about collaboration and connection, and we talk about them as soft skills. And I hate, you know, that term, one, it just diminishes
the most important ones, I mean.
Those are the hard things to find. Those are the people that are awesome at collaboration, connection, relationships, influence, followership. Those are the leaders of the future. And yes, do they have to have all the technical things that are required? Sure, but those are the things that that I'm looking for in the future for sure.
Yeah, we need to rebrand them from soft skills. We need some suggestions from people. What can
I know.
It's like it doesn't seem right, does it?
No.
when you put it that way.
I keep telling people I don't like it, but I don't have a better. You're right. I need some language.
We need to come up with one. Well, we're seeing HR is going for its own rebrand, right? Every day now, there's a new chief, people and experience officer and chief. I've seen chief happiness officer recently. You wouldn't believe.
That's cool.
For a huge company, chief happiness officer. I feel like that one's a bit extreme. I don't know if I agree with that one necessarily, but it's interesting, right? As well. But listen, I'm gonna let you go. But thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. I really appreciate it, and enjoy yoga.
Yes.
Have fun.
Great getting to know you. And when we rebrand HR, I call dibs on the neon sign behind you because it'll be a throwback.
Oh, really? Well, one of the things I want to create is like a HR heroes sign. And it sounds so cheesy, right? Or even like some merch. I know it sounds not to make money, but I'm more like I want to recognize some HR leaders, especially after the last couple like years we've had, and create some like HR heroes medals or like things and just send them to people.
I love it.
As
it's
well.
Awesome idea.
Yeah, all my cheesy ideas, anyway. So, and I'll let you know how the video goes. I'll tag you in.
Okay.
See what the public think. It should be interesting.
Yeah. I can't wait to hear
as well. But enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you again soon. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.